Today we're going to go through parameter sets and user-defined fields. There are certain fields within FinPower Connect that save to the user data field in the database via various user-defined pages throughout. This acts as a way to save custom information in the one field, though it can be formatted in different ways for user entry via things like widgets and parameter sets, etc. Because this stored information saves all in the one field, retrieving this information for reporting purposes and scripting can be a tad tricky at times, which is where the different user-defined fields can come in handy using indexing. User-defined fields allow 10 indexed items per user data type within your user data field. Looking at this basic diagram here will hopefully assist with the understanding of how this all fits together. There are two main ways of utilizing user-defined fields and user data in general. This is by utilizing the standard user data defined details located in global settings or via a parameter set. For now, we'll concentrate on the standard fields and where they're set and one way of how to find your data once it's all set up. So starting with the settings, in global settings, there are numerous areas throughout global settings where you can define some standard indexed fields. Starting with accounts, if we have a look at the user defined page, you can see here we've got 10 different slots available, starting with user 0 and down to user 9. As you can see here, I've been able to add labels, and you can select an information list if desired for the user to select from. I've prefixed them here with global settings or GS as we go through, so we can easily see once we get to the actual accounts and things where they're coming from, whether it's from global settings or whether the page has been overridden with a parameter set. There's also one for account applications, for account types, and here is where you can override the account type user-defined data, not the account's user-defined data. We'll go through that later. Clients. Again, we've got the 10 fields available here, and I've labeled them global settings, e.g. maiden name. To override the client user-defined page with a parameter set, you go to the client groups, which I'll show you in due course. There's one for departments. Here is where you can override that with a parameter set. Document manager. External parties. Securities for both the security type and the item. And tasks and workflows. Now this one's a little bit different, as we can see from the tooltip here. Unlike accounts and clients, specifying user-defined field names does not create an automatic parameter set on the workflow item. Form. The names defined below are only used for workflow-based reports. And finally, for users. There is the ability, as you can see here, to override the user-defined web details or the user-defined details on users themselves. So if we have a quick look at the difference here, for example, on the account type under the other page, we can override the user-defined page here with a parameter set, which is what we've done. If we have a very quick look at one of the accounts in that category, sorry, this is the security type, not the account. On the user-defined page here, we can see that there is many different fields. Now this is all structured by the parameter set. If we were to have a look at user-defined field set and global settings on their own, If we have a look at this particular account here that doesn't have that account parameter set defined, you can see here quite clearly we've got some basic fields here and they're labeled as I labeled them in global settings. So this one here, because I defined an information list, means I can select through here. Otherwise, it's just a free format type field. Once your user has entered some data on this page, it is then stored in the user data field as previously mentioned. Whilst the user can view the information here, you can also go to the Audit tab and have a look at what that information actually looks like within that field. So if we click on user data here, we can see that under UDF1, test is saved and it has been indexed, which is the key difference between generalized user data, which is this stuff up here, and an indexed field. This is here because there was previously a parameter set stored there and it has retained the data. It doesn't clear it, which is also useful to know. But the indexed information, of course, would overwrite. Again, back to our security type statements on the user defined here, we can see it's also got my labels here and same deal. It's just those whatever fields are defined in global settings, and you store the data. You can go to the audit and see what has been saved and so on and so forth. On the security item, there's an additional user defined page, which is that extra step level down that we saw in global settings. So the user-defined standard fields are fairly straightforward to set up, but of course that might not be enough information to capture. It is limited to the 10 available fields depending on what you set up, and that's where parameter sets come in really handy. So parameter sets are a tool that allow you to build up parameters for a wide range of activities within FinPower Connect. These are much more versatile, as just mentioned, than the standard UDF fields. And if we have a look at one of our parameter sets here, you can see why. So of course, like everything on the general page, you can label it with your code and your description. This option here is really handy because you can choose to display multiple pages as tabs where possible. That will only kick in where it's actually supported. The parameters page is our go-to in order to set the parameter set up. It's a lot easier when you're playing around with things to click on the preview tab and then you can see what it's going to look like. So if you remember when we had a look at that account before, I think it's this one here. You can see here we've got the two different tabs and it looks quite user-friendly, easy to go through. So this is a great way of checking your formatting and making sure that it's okay. Immediately what we can see here is that we have different options available, like a checklist as an example. That's not available as part of the standard UDF fields. Multiple tabs, again, is unique to the parameter sets, and you can have date fields and various other bits and bobs, which we'll have a quick look at now. In terms of the user data versus UDF indexed fields, obviously we're limited to 9, so you can choose carefully throughout your parameter set of the most important information that you need to be indexed. For example, if you needed to be able to pull something up by a script or a report, if you index it, it's going to be a lot easier to find. In order to add a parameter or to amend this is really easy. It's got our standard wee button strip along the bottom here. The arrows, you can change the order of things and you can duplicate items if they're going to be similar. You can also insert rows above and you can add an item. So if we click on that one now, we can have a wee look here and go through the wizard. So it's really easy to follow. We've got booleans, checklists, dates, date ranges, grouping lists, lists, numbers, number ranges, page starts, range, section starts, text, and including the standard parameters. So your section start and your page start are where you get the headers and the tab separators from. So the page start will obviously, we have a look at our wee thing here. I've got a page start here under risk assessment insurance plan. If we find that here, if we drill down into this item here, we should see that it's a page start, and it is. Fabulous. And so obviously your caption there will be reflected on the preview page in blue so that you know that it's going to be a new page. How that looks like on the actual account is it labels the tab at the bottom here because of the option I have selected. The section starts are reflected by these nice blue headers. So for example, my health insurance option here is a section start, a caption. You can choose whether it's visible or not. And from here you can even write your own tooltips, which is really handy. Looking at another sort of standard parameter here, we've got the checklist option. You can caption it whatever you like. You can change the indent, which will change the formatting on the page itself. Again, there's these options available here. And here is where you define whether you want it to map to one of the indexed fields. So I know that field 9 and field 5 I believe are taken, but I could choose to index this particular one to 4. And my list of checklist options is simply a comma separated list. So you can see here, I've just entered that in, and I've decided there should be a maximum of 8 rows. If you are SQL savvy, you can also enter SQL expressions in there to calculate a parameters value. That's something that the code team would probably cover off more than myself. And again, a lovely little tooltip. You can control these by permissions as well. So now we can see the number 4 has appeared down here under the UDF fields. And just having a wee look down here, we can't see our tooltip here, but if we click save and go here, we should be able to hover over our options and we see our tooltip. So it says select options requested by the client. So once you've got your parameter set, you've gone through and you've added all the bits and bobs that you'd like, including all the various options. So if we add one that I don't have here, just to show what the indent does. If you don't display a caption here, it will simply reflect the name, just as an FYI. You can include a standard range. Why not? We'll check account ledgers in there. And again, this is another area where you can add in a SQL where clause to further filter. Again, SQL expression and a tooltip and the permission key. So you can see how it's automatically got that indent in there. And if we pop over to the preview page, you can see down here it has indented it quite far, which looks terrible, but that's why we have the preview page so we can see what looks okay and what doesn't. So popping back over to our account, we may need to close and reopen this just to refresh it. We can see our range test has appeared down the bottom there, indented and all. There we can click on our range that we'd selected and choose which ledger. In this case, in this database, there's only one to choose from, but as you can see, the sky's the limit there. Now, if we go to the audit page and have another look, we can see that anytime if set up, you change this, it will store what has been modified. So here we can see there was quite a few updates to the parameter set earlier. And if we click on our user data field, we can see here all of the stored information. Again, your standard user data, which is any of the parameters that aren't indexed, will save like this. And any of the index field will have their special number and index notation next to them. So I picked that parameter set because it's got quite a bit going on, but there are sample parameter sets that you can use as a base if you're new to setting these up. This one here comes with the demo data, and it's got things like preferred contact times, contact methods, which can be referenced, I believe, by scripts and bits and pieces there. We've only got one UDF field on that particular one, but it's a really great place to start. Once you have a parameter set in place with your user data, again, as mentioned, the information can be utilized in many different ways, such as by scripts, reports, decision cards, and more. And as also mentioned, these parameter sets can be set to override the user-defined pages wherever they appear, pretty much. So client, account, account type, security type, security statement, external party, document manager, etc., etc. Some additional notes just to quickly cover off. Oh yes, this is an account, I think we covered that. Is things like reports, where you can utilize the standard UDF fields. Now, this doesn't work in quite the same way for parameter sets, although it will still generate the information if it's indexed to that field, but it'll reflect a label that's set in global settings. But you can do things like grouping by those fields out of the box, which is really handy to know. And the account details report, which I also wanted to showcase. I've saved this one here to only display the user-defined details for 3 of the accounts that we looked at. So if I just click our preview button there, you can see here we've got the account header up the top and the user-defined page. So this is the one that's reflecting just the UDF fields in global settings. This one here is a parameter set, but it's the more basic parameter set. And this report here with our rather full parameter set. You can see it displays all the checklist options available here. Again, this is all of the information on the parameter set or the user data field, so that's just something to be aware of. But the code team will cover off in more detail how those indexed fields can really be utilized in another session. That brings us to the end of the session for today, but as always, if there's any additional information you seek, please don't hesitate to contact application support for user interface queries or code support in relation to code-specific questions. In our next session, we will be covering elements and transaction types.